Does anyone else think that Dave looks a little bit like the monk from Peep Show? Do you remember when Sophie gets a new boyfriend? It's that monk.
Oh yeah,
I'll have to check that out. Other ones I've got on is lead singer from the House Martins.
Oh, Paul Heaton.
Paul Heaton. Paul Heaton has let himself go.
Why has he let himself?
Yeah, he's like 55, man.
A 55-year-old bloke who looks fatter than he is, looks a bit like you as a 36-year-old man. Lovely voice, looks like a chewed potato, but lovely voice.
The only person I look like is Mikey from Recess. Did you ever watch that?
Yeah. I get Ted Bundy. To the point where my work colleagues bought me a colouring book, which is just filled with black and white pictures of Ted Bundy for me to colour in while I work.
He was considered quite the looker on the Raper scene.
Yeah. I'm waiting for that weird fan mail to start coming through.
See, I only ever get two. I used to get called the grown-up version of the kid from About a Boy, or David Mitchell.
Yeah,
from
David
Peep Show.
Mitchell, definitely.
Happy New Year, Funketeers! It's 2021 and your boy Dan is back for another season of the Cacophony Sessions. Hope you've settled into the new year, which is basically the same old year wearing a different birthday badge. Back in lockdown, we thought there's no better way to kick off the calendar than by doing our record of the year for 2020. We've had our critical hats on for a few weeks now. We've done some scoring to bring you our own top 10 of 2020. There was so much good music last year, so let us break it down into smaller, digestible chunks of recommendation for you to swallow. But first, let's meet my guest tonight. We have Dave.
Hello, and it's London 0 Hull 4.
Thank you, Paul Heaton. Martyn.
Hi, my name's Martyn, and I don't usually get influenza, but when I do, I sweat music.
Alex.
Titanic. That's my icebreaker.
Oh no. I feel a ban coming on there. And Tom.
Today, I might have Marmite on toast. I'm still doing James May quotes.
He can't break the cycle. It's too deep now.
They're in his top 50 quotes on BuzzFeed.
Oh, right, okay.
Like, I've literally just pulled like Tinder opening lines for mine for this one. But you should see some of these. Do you have an ugly boyfriend? No. Do you want one?
Give us one more.
Do you read Dr. Seuss? Because green eggs and damn girl.
Oh, no.
Jesus.
Not Dr. Seuss.
That went down swiftly.
I'll do one last one. This is really cringy. On a scale from 1 to 10, you're a 9, and I'm the one you need.
Oh.
Can you imagine? That's an instant block, isn't it? Surely.
If someone said that to you in real life, you'd have to run.
The gang are all back together. Dave, the last time we heard from you, you were in, well, I think we left you in a hedge somewhere at the festival.
Yes, I double dropped and shit myself, so apologies for that.
Martyn, you're also conspicuously absent from the end of the episode. How's your time been in 2021?
It's been absolutely awesome, man. As you know, I was at the festival, and I did my usual thing, grabbed a bottle of red wine and walked home.
I hear you've bought a guitar for no reason.
Yeah, well, I had to buy a new cable for my mic, which Dave so kindly gave to me, and I'm very grateful for that. But I walked all the way to Exeter Street to the guitar shop in the rain, got soaked, spent 25 quid on a cable, saw this guitar hanging on a wall, a Les Paul, put a deposit on it without even thinking about it. So I'm going to be getting that in March. Got home, tried the cable, didn't work, realised the cable I already had was the right one that I needed. So that was 25 quid wasted. But there we go. I could have spent it on
It's not
purpose.
25 quid wasted, it's 425 quid wasted because you've also got a guitar you didn't need.
Well, yeah, I did.
Can I name your guitar?
You can name my guitar.
I think I'm going to call this guitar Superfluous.
Superfluous.
Because you really don't need it.
I don't.
Right now.
Superfluous.
Tom, what have you been up to?
I've been doing a lot more recording. Martin's heard some of it.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's really good.
I've really disappeared down a minimalist classical rabbit hole, but it's really inspiring me to do some composition. I think this lockdown's hit a lot of people harder, and me particularly, because all we're allowed to do is work now. Like in the previous lockdowns, there were other things that like you could do within the rules, and like now all I can do is work and walk the dog. And I wanted to do something that's sort of a bit melancholic but hopeful, and that was sort of what I was going for. And I think it's coming together fairly well. The piece I'm working on at the moment's probably going to be very long with no repetition in the whole thing. It's about 7 minutes already and counting. I'm doing that, listening to lots of different stuff, because there's a lot of new stuff coming out this week. I've always tried to keep up with music, and I drifted away a little bit, and then as soon as we started doing the podcast, I started getting my finger on the pulse. So this week in music, System of a Down released a new single.
Checking it out.
It's shit.
System of a Down like that.
Little Chris, baby.
I see what they're trying to do, but it's not good. The Hold Steady, on the other hand, released a fantastic single that is definitely worth checking out. It's really, really clever. The Hold Steady are a band I've sort of followed on and off for the last few years, and they do sort of interesting. Imagine what would happen if bands like Fontaine's DC were a country band in the background rather than
It can't be done.
post-punk. If anyone wants to hear something bizarre, somebody has mashed up Journey's Don't Stop Believing with Mudvayne's Dig, which is definitely worth listening to.
Man, that sounds quite good. I love me a bit of Mudvayne. I love Mudvayne, so that'd be kind of cool.
Al, what have you been up to?
Well, because I was doing research for another subject, we're going to have another podcast, which I'm not sure whether we're disclosing right now.
No, not quite yet. Not quite yet. The people aren't ready.
But so I've had to be listening to a lot of music, and I've basically before that I've been really, really into NoFX at the moment. I've listened to just a lot of NoFX, so that's kind of what I was listening to before I was supposed to do homework. And then doing the homework, it got me listening to Cannibal Corpse, and I've just decided to go through every Cannibal Corpse album, so I've only listened to like 3 or 4 of the newer ones.
That's Jim Carrey's favourite band, Cannibal Corpse.
He likes Lawnmower Death.
Yeah, he did mention them, didn't he? He did quite like him.
They're in Ace Ventura.
Yeah, in the club scene.
Pet Detective, because he likes them so much, he just got them in the film.
Yeah, it was. They play Hammer Smashed Face, I think. But yeah, that's what I've been listening to, a fuck ton of Cannibal Corpse. And in honesty, I think I prefer their newer stuff, where I actually prefer... There's always, for Cannibal Corpse fans, there's Chris Barnes fans and Corpsegrinder fans, the 2 vocalists. And I'm a Corpsegrinder man, because that's the band
course
I'm
you
going
are.
to.
You're not going to be the former. I can't even remember that group. That's how mundane it is. You want to be a corpse grinder at least. Hang on. Note to edit. Please make sure that comes through properly.
But yeah, amongst Cannibal Corpse fans, there's a bit of a debate on who's the better vocalist, because Chris Barnes was the original one who did all the classics at the start. So I'll ignore that, Dave, because you're an uncultured bastard.
Oh, God, we're here already.
That's me done.
Dave, have you been up to anything interesting?
Music-wise, I've just sort of been buying off the internet again. I managed to pick up some of the selections that I'm going to make this evening. And I've just been repairing and servicing my turntables, and I've bought another record player off the internet. It's actually for laziness purposes. There's an old Sharp record player from the 70s that's like upright, and it plays both sides of your records without you having to get off your arse. So it's like linear tracking on a belt, and it waits for the little gap in the record, and you can skip stuff. It's got loads of like little cool features that were like quite I suppose techie for the 70s or early 80s, but yeah, I'll get that. It's probably going to need some servicing. It'll probably need new bands and new belts and fuck around with the cogs, but yeah, it's a nice record player. Yeah, they're really nice. My dream was to have 2 with remotes so I could play double albums without getting off the couch.
That sounds fantastic.
Wow.
Right, I need to do that.
I've been still trying to summon the demon Baphomet, but he's remaining ever elusive. My cult are getting a bit vexed. But there we go.
Baphomet also was not located in my copy of Controversy. that I realised I hadn't actually opened in the 4 or 5 years that I've owned it. Thinking it's just there for decoration. I don't own a vinyl player. I'm digital only. We've gone over this. It's boring. But decided to open up my copy of Controversy for the first time and discovered there's actually a poster in there for thinking, I've got some posters up on my wall of various musicians that I love. I'll add another Prince poster to the collection.
It's a fucking
I don't think it's really
humdinger.
suitable though, because if you Google Controversy poster Prince, you'll see that it's actually him in a pair of Y-fronts in the shower.
It's a doozy.
So being a man who backs down from no challenge, I placed it on my wall above my bed, but I was promptly told to remove it by my other half. Bow down, unfortunately. But yeah, I thought that was the most suitable place to put that poster, right above my bed, Prince and his wife fronts. It's going to empower you.
I don't know, it gets the
I mean,
ladies in the
having
mood.
seen the
doesn't it?
posters, probably the most uncomfortable I've ever been looking at a single image.
Yeah.
You can't talk though, Al, because I do believe that you are a bit of a Kevin Nash fan.
Oh, big sexy Kevin Nash. I didn't know him as Big Daddy Diesel. I knew him in the WCW. But I had a big sexy poster when I was growing up from ages probably like 8 to 14. And I didn't realise how homoerotic that picture was. I liked his work as a wrestler, and he is big, and he is sexy.
He's got a great pout going on as well.
Not very good hamstrings though, if you're a wrestling fan. The reason we're here tonight is to discuss our picks for our top 10 of the records of the year 2020. Now, we each nominated 3 albums that we consider to be our personal favourites. We then scored them out of 10, and therefore each album has a total out of 50, which we use to rank them. In the event of a draw, we've gone with the album with the lowest individual rating. We'll finish lower. And then if it's a tie, we'll look for the highest result. So there's been a lot of good music out, as I mentioned earlier, in 2020. It's been a really interesting year with lockdown happening. A lot of artists have really pulled out all the stops to create interesting music and go in different directions. There's been a lot of creative uses of live music because we haven't been able to attend festivals. And some artists have chosen not to release their material in 2020 and are going to put it out this year in 2021. But not every artist took that decision. And so there was a whole heap of albums. Before we start discussing our top 15, I will include the rundown from 15 to 11. Are there any albums that we wanted to talk about and give honourable mentions to before we start tonight's countdown, guys?
Yeah, I think we need to mention Venar in the Dead Wood.
Absolutely.
Because that was a great album. And Deftones Ohms as well. Other really great albums, Aiming for Enrique, Music for Workouts, is really interesting math rock. I think the rest of you would have hated it, but anyone who's into interesting electronic odd time signature stuff, it's absolutely fantastic. And Yonzi's solo album Shiver was in my top 5 as well. That was a really, really good record. I know Al hated it.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't a good record. Why would you lie to the people, lie to the masses?
It's not full of bangers, but it's a very beautiful record to listen to.
It's like watching paint dry. A really nice colour of paint, but it's still dull as shit. Sorry.
I will absolutely second Venar. That album blew me away. The first track on it is unreal. It's got that classic thing that I like where there's no real standard structure to it. It's not a verse, chorus. It starts off with kind of a quiet passage and then it goes into like the big classic Oceanside style wall of sound guitars, really thick, heavy guitars, really melodic as well. The vocals are fantastic on it. But it's kind of a chord cycle and it's got all of the Venar Oceanside things that I like about Oceanside in it, and that album's great. Another one I wanted to mention, and I'm really showing my age here, is Dove's released a new album. They split up, got back together, and I've always had such a deep, strong affection for Doves. They're a classic, rainy Manchester indie band, and they make such beautiful music, and their album was a return to form. It was really great, but it is for, old dudes in cardigans with vinyl collections to listen to.
On a similar ilk to that, I mean, they've released it in this year, but Teenage Fan Club.
What a band.
I love Teenage Fan Club.
Of that ilk, I've got a new album come out, I think fairly recently. I think it may have even crossed into last year, but I think it's come out 2021, not 2020.
I think Teenage Fan Club might come up again in the future, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple albums that didn't come out. Kanye's album, which was due to drop this year and didn't in 2020, it's been delayed. And Stevie Wonder's album, where he released 2 singles from it, the same as Kanye, dropped 2 singles actually. And that didn't come out. So if either of those were to come out, from what I've heard from the singles, they probably would have made my picks. I'm really looking forward to Stevie's new album. It seems to be like almost a Prince Vault type affair, where he's got like a big back catalogue of stuff he's been waiting to release because he's been trying to break away from Motown.
Yeah.
And a couple of albums I didn't pick, like Busta Rhymes had Extinction Level Event Volume 2 come out, which I didn't pick, but is a good album. It's not a great album. It's a good album. Chris Rock does skits in between it, and I had the first Distinction Level Event in the 90s on CD, which had Give Me Some More on and some other like Busta Rhymes classics.
The one I had was, I think I talked about it at some point last year, just when we were asking what we listened to, it was probably my number 4, was Warbringer, Weapons of Tomorrow. I doubt you guys listened to it, but it's just a good fresh album. It's different to their other stuff because it's a little bit, I don't know, it's like a bit more professional. It's almost like they've taken that Metallica leap where it just sounds a bit more clean cut and the song structures are nicer and all this stuff. But
like a Saint Anger move.
Yeah, well, not even Saint Anger, but it's still good. But
I think he means more like a move to the Black Album.
a little bit, yeah. It's kind of, but it's still more fresh than that. But anyway, I really liked it, but it wasn't as good as some of their other albums, so I couldn't realistically. It was still better than most albums I've listened to this year, but because it wasn't as like great for them, in my opinion, I couldn't justify putting it in my top 3 if I'm mildly disappointed. So yeah, it was good though. I did really enjoy it, but it's just nothing ever beats their second album. So.
I think that's a similar reason why Biffy Clyro didn't make my top 3. It's a great album, but it's not as good as their early stuff.
There were a number of albums that didn't quite make my top 3. The Weeknd just narrowly missed out, really. I really enjoyed After Hours. It was a bit too heavy on ballads, like I find most of his albums. But there are some really good songs on there. In Your Eyes was one of my favourite songs. That sax solo at the end is incredible. Blinded by the Lights was a great single, and I really like the song After Hours. The song itself, the melody on that is gorgeous. It's got a really good build to that song. There were other albums. Tame Impala just missed out The Slow Rush, which was a great album, just not quite as good as Currents, I don't think. We had Childish Gambino again. I think he made a bit of a step back with that record. It wasn't as good as Awaken My Love, but then I don't think many albums have been in recent years. That's one of my favourite albums. Then JoJo, she had an album out. I've always been a fan of her stuff. I think she's a really good example of a child star that can mature pretty well. And then there were other albums as well that missed out on the top 3, but it's so difficult when you've got such a load of material. Sparks had an album out. Erasure had an album out.
Yeah, I like that Erasure album. That was nice.
Fiona Apple, I went back and listened to Fetch the Bolt Cutters, which has been pretty highly rated, and there's some really good songs on it. I really like Shamika. I think it's the second track on that album. And I've gone back and discovered her stuff that I'd missed out on before. So really good. Just not quite enough to my tastes that it made my top 3, but I recognise it as a really significant album. Likewise, Perfume Genius set my heart on fire immediately.
That wasn't bad. There's some good shoegazy sounds on that one.
Yeah, very good indie pop record.
You mentioned Tame Impala. There's a real badass song by Mark Ronson that's just come out with Kevin Parker on it. Again, I can't remember I think it's called Daffodils or something like that. It is a funk banger. You would love it. It's fucking hardcore. Yeah, it's really well produced. It's Mark Ronson. You can't go wrong. But there's like the elements of the Tame Impala in there with some sort of unusual synths and stuff. And there's like halfway through this really dirty bass line kicks and this dirty synth bass. It's really, really good. It's a repeat listen job. So check that out. I know you like Mark Ronson, so like you might like that.
Yeah, I went back and listened to Version the other
great
day,
album.
actually.
I've had the pleasure of having very brief chats with him in London before when I went to go see Dave Chappelle at the beginning of this year. Just gone, he was like front row as well with a few other like famous-ish people, Ian Wright and Alexei Sale and stuff. But yeah, he's a cool dude. Definitely, and he's produced some fucking good music.
It's time for the top 15 of our own personal choices for 2020. Insert drum roll / countdown here. In 15th place,
Yeah, that was good. Solid, seamless.
the total of 30 out of 50. It was Drain with California Cursed, which was one of Al's picks. Al?
Let me compose myself.
The rage is coming back.
He knows the scores now.
This was personally my album of the year. If you got anyone like sort of thrash, sort of like hardcore crossover, you may really enjoy it. I absolutely fucking love this album. There's something like, I can guess why some people might kind of see it as maybe average or something. I'm not sure, like, because it got a few low scores from around the group. But you know when you just have an album that, like, even though everyone else is like, yeah, it's okay, it just manages to just hit everything you like in music, if you know what I mean. Like, there's not really one bad bit in everything you like, and you think, wow, I would write this if, I would totally write this. This would be what I would want to write if I was making music. It's one of those bands where, so I can understand if other people don't like it. I'm not happy. Some of the scores, Whittle, are a bit too low.
Hey, it's not my bag.
You picked two fairly similar-ish genre albums, and I think this was the weaker of the two for me, because I think the production wasn't quite as good as on the other one. And actually, what's interesting on this one, so a lot of really heavy bands will try and change the pace at one point on the album, and the problem for me on this album is the track they try to change the pace on, Hollister Daydream. It ruins the album for me. Like, normally I like the slow song in the middle of an album, but in this particular one, in Hollister Daydream, which is the one where they try and slow it down, the acoustic guitar's out of tune, and it drove me up the wall.
I always like music more if, like, at the moment anyway, I think I find music more endearing if I feel like I could have made that. You see what I mean? Like, not necessarily because it's, it's not like I'm amazing, I could write a lot of music I'm listening to, but it's just because it just gives you that sense of grounding where I feel like real people made it. Like, a lot of bands I listen to, and this is probably a big reason I'm not into as much pop stuff or a lot of like the more mainstream rock stuff, is just because for me it just sounds like they've taken 3,000 attempts to do 3 chord progressions, you know what I mean? And the drummer sounds so amazingly perfect that for me it goes past not really being music.
I think it's a relatability thing, and like, I like kind of highly produced stuff and real scrappy, just garage stuff, but like, I do know what you mean. There's a certain kind of relatability to music that does sound more human. We talked in the other podcast, the Prince podcast last night, about synthesizers having feeling, and it's not actually as common as you would think. And I think sometimes music can be overproduced where the actual feeling and emotions can be produced out of it. And I also sometimes like listening to music from the point of view as if I was playing it, a bit like you.
It's almost like escapism where you imagine you're the one.
Yeah, in a way, yeah, I guess.
I think it's a relatable escapism rather than a true escapism.
It's relatability.
In 14th position with 30.5 points was your other pick, Al. This was Impenetrable Cerebral Fortress by Gulch. It's a kind of similar vibe on that album, so I think your relatability would apply to that as well, would you say?
Well, it's a similar genre. I wouldn't say it's a similar vibe, but it's... Well, the only reason I know who Gulch are is because I got really into Drain, and then I was watching a live video, of them. And then someone in the comments wrote, "Is that the drummer of Gulch who's singing?" I went, "What? He's also a drummer." So then I looked up Gulch, and then I found them out, and they also listen to people. So yeah, so California hardcore music apparently is really strong on my decks right now. But I love this album as well. But I prefer Drain, but that's because I just like a bit more of a groove. But this one is just an absolute 16-minute assault on your senses, and ends with a was it Sue and the Banshees cover right at the end?
Susie and the Banshees, yeah.
Yeah, Susie and the Banshees. Yeah. I prefer it to the original, like 20-fold. So I just think if anyone has got 16 minutes to spare, just give it a go. It's kind of like if Converge were more punk, if you know what I mean, with the drumming style anyway. And it's just non-stop assault on the senses, really.
An assault is a good way of describing it. It's a cacophony would be another way of describing it. It certainly catches your ear for 16 minutes.
You're being very nice about it, Whittle. What do you really think about it?
Yeah,
It's just not to my personal taste.
It's not aimed at you.
It's not aimed at me. I'm the kind of guy who puts pictures of Prince on his wall in his Y front, so I'm not gonna listen to really hardcore punk metal. It's not for me.
Well, the listeners have now seen how I've been fucked. You know, everyone can see it. Three albums, 2 of them at the bottom.
Nah,
2.
you still got one more pick though.
I should point out that several of the metal magazines ranked the Gulch album really high.
Yeah.
And if you are into punk metal, the Gulch album is considered to be very, very good.
I mean, I think it's like genre defining. I haven't heard anything like it.
We also have to remember that these are still ranked quite highly. I mean,
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
14th best album of 2020.
Out of all the 30 we picked, yeah.
In 13th place was a bit of a divisive one. This was Emma Ruth Rundle and Now's album, which was called May Our Chambers Be Full. Tom, this was yours.
Now, this is a travesty. This is so low. And I also know that had Dan given it anything over a 3.5, it would have been up to about
Again,
7.
It's not to my personal taste.
No, this is a genre-defining album. It's a really, really important album. It's like 3 independent non-metal web magazines have rated it as their album of the year. It's the 4th highest Metascore of all the albums that we've nominated, I should add as well. Like, it's an absolutely fantastic album. It blends Emma Ruth Rundle, whose solo stuff is fantastic.
You sent me the challenge before the podcast came on to listen to her solo stuff.
Yeah.
I listened to the track Protection, from which is from the album
Marked for Death.
Marked for Death, that's it. I listened to it. I really dug it. It's like an alternative rock kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like her. I think it's thou that are not to my taste.
Yeah.
I think I'm the opposite.
Emma Ruth Rundle is a fantastic vocalist.
Yeah.
She's got a really unique vocal. Her guitar sounds are fantastic. I mean, she was the guitarist in Red Sparrows, who were a very important post-rock band.
Great band, yeah.
She knows what she's doing, and thou are, within the doom metal genre, are a very, very well-regarded doom metal band.
Yeah, I just think it's doom metal that's not for me.
And the two together is greater than the sum of its parts, because I'm not a huge doom metal fan, but this album is... I'd say this album does to doom metal what OK Computer did for prog in the 90s. Like, that's how important an album I think it is.
I liked a lot of the, heavy guitars and stuff. I did really enjoy it, but I'm not sure if it's something I would probably choose to put on again. If I came around your house, Tom, and we were having a few beers and we were sat there with our cardigans on and our glass of brandy, and you put it on, I would really, really enjoy it. But in my limited time, I don't think it would find a place for me.
It's quite a dense listen.
Yeah, it is.
You can't casually listen.
Just for anybody who does want to check it out, if they want to get straight into it and just listen to one track, the track 3, Out of Existence, there is a bit about 2 minutes 20 seconds into that track that is just the perfect build up. It is the perfect build. It's just fantastic.
I would have given it a higher score, but I thought the last track dragged on a bit. There's one thing I hate in music in general, I hate intros. I hate anything. I just hate intros music. I feel like I'm just waiting for it to kick in.
Competently, people trying.
I don't mind intro if it's like an amazing, like if it's like a dance tune, like a Faithless intro. I like that because it gets the anticipation going in that. But when it comes to just rock music, sometimes I'm just like, just get into it.
In 12th position, with 32.5 points, was What's Your Pleasure by Jessie Ware, which was one of my nominations, you bastards. Again, a very...
Daniel is rated very highly for the year.
It is rated very highly by not just us, lots of musicians. Pitchfork liked it a lot as well. It's a really well-crafted pop album. It's got a lot of 80s sounding bangers that were... elaborated on other albums, like we'll talk about another one later on. But The Weeknd did a similar kind of vibe on his album with a kind of retro disco sound with 80s synths plastered all over it. And I thought that there's several singles on it that I really love. Ooh La La. Soul Control is one of my favourite songs of the year. It really reminds me of a kind of Janet Jackson funky pop song. Really good guitar work. Another track called In Your Eyes, which is the same name as The Weeknd's track from that album, which I really loved as well, with some cinematic strings. Sounds a bit like D'Angelo. Then it's got Remember Where You Are to close the album, which is kind of like this big musical number. It's just got really lush production all over it. Really well crafted pop songs, really melodic. You can dance to it, and it's the album that I want to hear when I'm out and about and lockdown finishes. I want to hear Soul Control. That'll get me on the floor. It's really well constructed, and I really love that album.
I thought it was boring.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about the production on it, I think it's so compressed it ends up being quite an inoffensive vanilla album. Like, I didn't hate it, but it ends up sounding like a lot of the tracks draw from the same palette of sounds. It doesn't have a huge... The only track that I thought the only track that really stood out for me is the track Save a Kiss.
That's a good track.
That stood out for me because it's actually got, interestingly, a synth sound that wouldn't sound out of place on a post-rock album. But it's a lot of it. It was just like she uses a very standard framework on the album. Now, just so it's very much burbling synth bass, bit of brass, and some strings over the top. And like she's got a decent voice, but it doesn't. I think when I think you could dance to this album. Like it's possibly a little bit. I don't dance anyway, so I thought maybe it was a bit slow for dancing. But Dan is the dancer in the group, so I'll bow to his knowledge on this one.
That's why officially you can't be a friend of mine.
Ha ha ha. But yeah, it just. I don't think her voice carries choruses in on this album.
I enjoyed the album immensely. I thought it was some really good songs and stuff, but in a way I kind of agree with Tom in that I really love the production and everything, and that whole retro disco thing is right up my street. As you know, I'm a massive Goldfrapp fan. But what I kept thinking was it kept making me want to put on the new Roisin Murphy album instead, which is kind of a similar vein but just more interesting. I think what I found with Jessie Ware was it's kind of like where there was a lack of sexiness to it, whereas someone like Roisin Murphy, there's a kind of weird arty sexiness to her work, which adds something interesting. That, yeah. Whereas Jessie Ware was kind of like like listening to your sister, like it was just absolutely sexless, you know.
I don't know. I think it was like some of the, like I think just from start to finish, it just felt like a woman who was obviously in love with a bloke, and every song was about her loving this bloke. To the same, not the same music, but the same vibe of music, the same sort of similar vocal delivery, and like, you know, I don't think she did many highs or lows with her voice. It seems quite continuously at one sort of pitch, and it was good. It was like the first track, so I gave it a 5, and to be honest, I think that's what it deserves me, because the first song I was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty good. The second song, okay, yeah, this is alright. Third song, alright, it's a bit similar, and then by the sort of 5 and 6 mark, it was just dying off with interest for me.
Generalism alert. I think there's more young female singers than there is young male solo singers, and I think a lot of young female singers get lost in the crowd a little bit. A couple of the tracks pricked my ear, but a lot of them were, they weren't doing much for me.
I would just describe it as just quite good disco.
Yeah, it's quite good disco.
I like quite good disco.
Yeah, so do I, Dan.
Want to be. In 11th place was another of my picks. Was RTJ4 by Run the Jewels.
That should have been higher.
Which, I think it should have been higher.
That's a criminal that is that point.
But Tom's going to tell us why in a moment. But
yeah.
It's just chock full of hip hop bangers. Ooh La La, DJ Premier on it. And Just with Pharrell and Zach De La Rocca, Pulling the Pin. It's got Mavis Staples shows up towards the end of the album. It's just really cool how they build from like the concept of a TV show delivering political messages, and then it finishes with the cheesy theme music to kind of really go against the sincerity of the message of the album. It's just really good music, though. I think take away the message, which Tom is going to talk about in a minute, but take away the message, and the production from LP is fantastic. Killer Mike is always on his game, and one of the greatest MCs.
I like both of them, but would you say that production's particularly any better, head and shoulders above the production and rhyme delivery and flow of the other three albums? I would say it's on par, if not worse.
Yeah, on a par.
If you're asking about Run the Jewels in terms of growth, I don't think there is much.
No.
I think you put on track one of their first album, and it's just a constant barrage of great beats, all the way up until the last track on the fourth album. It doesn't change much. It's exactly what you expect from.
But then you could say the same about Public Enemy. I mean, to be honest with you, put on any Public Enemy album.
I wouldn't say that at all about Public Enemy. They had some real bum albums, and I think that they've got some absolutely ace albums, and their political message was overarching throughout all of them. But they had some hit records and they had some flop records. The same as Run the Jewels, but I think what Tom is going to pick up on in a minute is it, much like all the other albums we've been talking about earlier, it gets lost in a kind of mud, unfortunately. There's so many people covering the same subject, and I don't think they're particularly doing anything new, is my only opinion on this album.
Before I let you loose, Tom, if you're talking about what hip-hop is to me, it's a series of songs which are designed as impact poetry. So it's usually 3 minutes where they've got to grab you, deliver the message of whatever the song's about, whether it's about Kung Fu from the Wu-Tang Clan, or whether it's a more politically charged message like it is on Run the Jewels. Hip-hop has always been about get in, get out, deliver the message in an interesting flow, with a stomping beat that you can bounce to over the top. And this is no different. This is exactly the same. It delivers on that front. Whether you like the message or not, it's musically great. It does what it needs to do.
All I'm saying is the music and the message and the beat were maybe 95%, and all the hip-hop that I like are 96 and above. I don't dislike it. I think it's great.
Before Tom goes off, I might as well get my opinion in. I've never listened to one of their albums before. It was actually the first album I listened to by them, and I did enjoy it. It was good, and I like all the beats underneath it were really good. The rapping was really good. Everything was just good, but I still didn't score it as high as I have with some of the other albums on here. I don't know why. It was just it was just that lack of gut feeling of this is awesome. You know what I mean? There's this is good, and then there's wow, this is really good, and it didn't quite tick that box for me. So
Tom, look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
I hate that line so much. I'm very politically active. I've always been quite politically active. I'm not gonna go into too much detail about that. What really annoys me is that if you're going to make political points in music, at least make them accurate. This song annoys me because it's Zach De La Rocca delivering the line, who was in Rage Against the Machine, whose trademark in the early 90s was they were usually their main shtick was killing people is wrong and that sort of, and it was very politically motivated. but they got their facts straight. The thing is, if you're gonna shout a line like, "Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar bills," there are 6 presidents on dollar bills in the US. 3 of them never owned slaves in their lives. 2 of them freed them all, and the other one arranged for them to be freed on his death. So it's not even true. In which case, like, they are the Democratic version of the Republican "Make America Great Again." The same thing they're rallying against, they're making the same mistakes. So the political message is really flawed in this album. And that really, really annoys me, because I think that they make such great points in the record. There are some really important points that are being made in America. And I think to throw a line like that over the top of it, which is incorrect, is just foolish. Like, I have other problems with this album though. Like, I really like the last 2 tracks. Samples in it are really good, and there's the sax part. But like, apart from the last 2 tracks, I think, like, I followed ELP for years. I loved Fantastic Damage and like Cannibal Instrumentals, which is just the instrumental parts for a record that he did with another hip hop artist, are fantastic, and I listened to them loads. Whereas this, comparatively, is so poor. Like, Ooh La La has all the musicality of a car alarm. As like, it's that Ooh La La that's being sung over and over again is just annoying for me. Like, and I find that I liked the first couple of Run the Jewel albums, but like Killer Mike on this, the only words I could pick out half the time were the swear words. So it's not for me, and I think I admire what they were trying to do, and I admire the musicians who made it, but it's a big miss for me.
Top 10 now, and it's another one of my picks. So all the conspiracy theorists out there thinking I've rigged it, nope, I'm out after this one. In 10th position, narrowly cracking our top 10 of the year, was Dua Lipa's record Future Nostalgia, which was a great pop record. I actually didn't like it as much as Jessie Ware, but there are some great singles on it. Levitating, Cool, Don't Start Now. It's just chock full of great songs. Cool being my personal favourite. It goes to a lot of interesting places in Boys Will Be Boys, with the whole lyrics about the Me Too movement and what's appropriate, and women having to hold their keys in their hands out of fear. So it's got some thought-provoking messages in there. It's got like Jeff Basker involved, who was the guy, one of the guys responsible for Uptown Funk. I know, Dave, that's going to trigger you, but we won't go there. It's got Stuart Price, who was involved in a lot of great records as well.
Great producer.
He did We Are Young by Fun and Janelle Monáe. He's worked with Madonna, The Killers, so he's got some pedigree. So it's good people behind it. Her vocals are on fire. She goes from baritone all the way through the ranges. She's got a great voice with so much range to it. It's just great to listen to. She's got a good, confident personality, and I think it's a second album. I remember New Rules from the album before, and she shows a lot of maturity for somebody on her second album. I think she could be one to watch for the future. Dua Lipa. She's got enough personality to go interesting places. I can see her being maybe another Janelle Monáe, or maybe somebody who could potentially reach the heights of a Madonna or a Janet Jackson if she continues to grow. Another artist who I think is one to watch for the future is Leanne LaHavas, who had an album out this year which was really good as well. But Dua Lipa for me is taking some really good steps towards being an interesting pop artist with a good track record for releasing great singles that are going to do well on the radio. There's a bit in Boys Will Be Boys. I've noted here that it sounds a bit like Linkin Park. There's the melody of Boys Will Be Boys. It resembles Calling by Linkin Park. And I don't know whether that's intentional. We've talked before on the podcast about toxic masculinity, which is what the song's about. And it's potential origins within new metal and that scene. So do we think that's an intentional choice?
No.
No, I think that's so nuanced it can't possibly be true.
I think it's just a coincidence.
When I was listening to this album, I mean, I was on the school run, I was in my dressing gown and I was dropping the kids off to school and Snapchatting my friends about
Did you have a glass of
bastard
Prosecco?
their baby dad. And I was going home for some Prosecco and some ice cream
Should've
and
had
watch
a
some
car
soaps. And I really, really, really liked that album. I've heard Don't Start Now like several times a day, every day. It's on like heart rate, on your local radios and stuff.
It's a really good song, though.
It's a good song. Even when I hear it now, I still kind of like it. You know, amongst all the dross I have to listen to while I'm at work on the fucking heart, which I fucking despise. It's a little shining diamond amongst the crap. It's really well written and it's really well produced.
It's all about the hooks on the album.
But what I'll say,
Yeah.
Vicky, but what I'll say, Dan, is I'll agree with you. I think it's the sound of somebody. You know, she's only had 2 albums out. She's written them. It's not like someone else is writing for her.
There's other songwriters involved, but she's the directive force behind it.
Yeah, it's her project, and I think what you've done is hit the nail on the head in that
We
it's the beginnings of a future. And I think you're right. I think she's someone to look out for, and I think if she continues to keep writing and maybe experimenting, she could definitely become quite big in her own right, rather than sounding like a lot of the other, solo female vocalists that are out there. Because at the moment, she kind of does fit in with that whole the solo female musician thing. But because it's her creative kind of thing, I do agree. I think she's someone who could potentially have a really great career making interesting music. I really like the album. It's not something I'd listen to unless I'm on the school run, but it is a great album.
It was my same opinion. I think In a Capsule was great. I don't really have any problems with it. I think the songs are okay, but I think it's a bit juvenile. I think she's going to grow into a lot better musician than we've got now. I see potential, but it's something that I wouldn't really call as a good album at this moment.
So I'm going to really surprise Dan now. I think I might have scored this album a bit low, and I know the reason why. So I listened to this album again a few times, and I tell you what, I listened to it on random, and I took Physical out, and Good in Bed came up earlier in the album, and all of a sudden it worked.
so you like on shuffle.
So for me, the track as an album, the lyrics are occasionally very, very clunky. Like the track Physical, the lyrics are the lyrics are awful. But the Good in Bed and Boys Will Be Boys have some interesting, like the lyrical conceit behind the tracks is really.
I love
good.
him having to say the words "good in bed."
Tom has problems with the sexy elements of the album. It's very
no, it's how do I phrase this? There's certain ways of singing about sex that I find really objectionable. Interestingly, the track "Good in Bed" I don't find objectionable. What I find interesting, I think my problem with the album was that it's all very synth heavy, big choruses, and then at the end of the album she sticks on "Good in Bed" and Boys Will Be Boys, which are a total tonal shift.
Yeah.
And I really liked those two. Now, I found that if I stick Good in Bed front-loaded in the album to break up the choruses a bit, with Boys Will Be Boys at the end, and take Physical out, I like that as an album.
So you completely change the tone of the album and rearrange all the tracks. You were giving it 1 point higher.
Take Physical out, it would be a 6. And if you put Good in Bed towards the front, it would probably be a 7 or an 8. Like, just the flow of the album didn't work for me. Like, but there are some really good tracks on it. Like, I'm not... and the more I listen, the more I have to hear them at work, because one of my nurses changed the radio to Heart and took the knob off, so I can't change it back to Classic FM. I don't have that power.
All right, burnt face man.
No, some of the tracks are growing on me the more I hear them, like the singles on the radio. I think it's just I dislike the track Physical so much.
If you're listening, Ms. Leaper, or Dua, as we might call you, you just need to sack your track sequencer and you might have a better rating from the Cacophony Sessions podcast. So hire Tom.
And if you could let your fellow women know not to mess with his radio, that'd be great as well, please.
I'm like you guys. I don't, well, except for Whitway. This isn't my usual genre. I didn't even know who she was. I don't follow pop at all. So when you put this one up, I had no idea who it was or whatever. I don't listen to the radio. But the single I did recognise from when we drive to Asda or whatever, I recognise that, and I remember that from the car, and I really like the single. I can't remember what it's called now.
Break My Heart.
Is that the dun du 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 du?
Oh, man, we're waiting for the sing song.
Yeah, the NXS riff.
I can honestly say I liked every song quite a lot, and it never got boring for me. The tonal shifts were big enough where it kept me interested, and I honestly it got to track 4 or 5, and I thought, all right, when's that one song where I think, with most pop records, they're usually quite patchy. When am I going to go? When are we going to get to that patch of just turd? And it never really came.
Patch of turd.
Yeah.
That's our new area where we cash shit things. You are now condemned to a life in the patch of turd.
Exactly. It never really got to the patch of turd, and I just really liked it. And I was listening to it on Napster, and it just went on to her other songs from previous albums.
Napster?
And
Did it hurt travelling back to 2003?
No, the reason I'm using Napster is because for our album of the year, I didn't want to pay for all the music individually, so I decided to actually, I think mine did the same, to actually go on a music subscription sort of thing. And I don't like Spotify, and because they don't give the artists any money, so I literally just Googled which one gives the artist the most money, and Napster gives them the most. So that's why I got that one.
Noble reasoning. I like it.
I was under the impression that Tidal was the one that gave the most money to the artist, but no, it's actually Napster.
Probably
and,
because of
it's not
Metallica's
Metallica suing them.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Napster, man, I didn't even know they fucking exist. You've brought me back.
Yeah, I'm now wondering if LimeWire are going to resurface.
Start downloading on Kazaa.
In 9th position, narrowly ahead with 33.5 points, was one of Dave's picks, and this is an interesting pick from an interesting artist. And I know I keep saying interesting way too much, so I'm going to use different words. Controversial artist. It's Morrissey with "I Am Not a Dog on a Chain." His 2020 release. Something a little bit different to what he was doing with the Smiths, and a little bit different to his previous solo work. So a unique record amongst his discography, nonetheless. I thought it was okay. Dave?
Yeah, I think it's a fucking great album. He's done quite a few solo albums now. This is his latest. When I've seen him live a couple of times, he's played with a Spanish backing band, which I think is the same guys that he's got now. But it's really synth heavy, and it's kind of a little bit dance-esque, and there's kind of funk elements and soul elements, which is massively unusual because he's gone on record in the past of saying some fairly disparaging things about all of those genres. But the record in itself, I think, is brilliant. And the subject matter we've briefly discussed, I don't think is as disparaging as a lot of other people do. He said some fantastically stupid things.
The elephant is in the room.
Exactly. He's got a particular style of singing. He started that style off because he didn't want to sound like anybody else. All he asked was people sound different. You can't really use his style of singing against him because his entire style was born because he didn't want to sound like everybody else and he didn't want to do anything else. His entire ethos was, let's just do something fucking different. Although it's samey in himself, at least it's different from the crowd.
It's certainly idiosyncratic, and I think without that, Morrissey to me is nothing, because Morrissey's singing style and his vocals are still quality, and I don't think that many people would argue that he can't sing it. He can. He's still a great vocalist, and this album shows that. He's got some interesting new ideas musically. I mean, there's more funk and blues sounding stuff. The track that I noted down as being called Secret of Music has got a more bluesy funk style to it that's not present in his earlier stuff, all this stuff with the Smiths. Truth about Ruth, though, is there's songs on there that he's so embedded in his own thought process that he can't not come across as bitter and twisted by these warped ideas of nationalism and white supremacy, that whether or not he's a racist in himself, you can't deny he says foolish things, and the ideas are somewhere within him, and he cannot help but write songs that are possibly transphobic, like The Truth About Ruth, which is it's a Morrissey song all over. It's got this verbose lyrical style.
I will stop you there, because we did touch upon this, and I have looked at the lyrics, and I actually think that particular song isn't transphobic. Although I 100% agree with you, he is nationalist and he does say silly things, and he is knee-jerk and verbose and reactionary, and he's said some things I don't agree with, so I'm not going to defend everything he says. But I think The Truth About Ruth is... I've just got the lyrics up in front of me. I think it's more of a celebration of LGBTQ issues and how they are, because it's a poem and it can be lost in translation, and you can look at it one way and you look at it other, but I think you are looking at it with lenses which
I'd still argue it's the worst track on the album.
Yeah. It is not a great song, but I don't want that to be a point in which he dies, because I actually don't think it's transphobic at all. I think it's actually a celebration.
Well, may well be the case. I may have read the lyrics wrong, or even potentially heard them wrong, and it may not be. But the problem with Morrissey is that he's so dislikable as a person that imprints onto his music. We've talked before about separating the artist from the art, and therefore forgiving people their indiscretions to a certain degree. And Morrissey, I forgive him the indiscretions, but it's so imprinted onto his work that I don't give him the benefit of the doubt in these situations. I read lyrics that could be potentially transphobic. If he means it ironically, he's lost that trust with his audience where you can't say,
no, I don't think he
Morrissey
says many things ironically. I think what he does say he means, and I think that's part of the argument. I don't think he would be that, watered down. If he wants to say something, he's going to say it. I mean, he's got his first track on the album is he's sick of people whining, if you want to kill yourself, kill yourself. I don't think he's going to hide behind his virtues when it comes to the truth.
I mean, if there's something you can take either way, even if you don't know anything about Morrissey, if there's something where you could take either way, his singing style and just his voice in general, he just sounds a bit sarcastic. So yeah. I can imagine why even if he's saying, "Oh, it's great," because of his singing style, you might jump to the conclusion he isn't. But if you don't know, that's what his singing style's like,
I don't agree with his opinions on race, and I don't agree with his opinions on nationalism to the degree that he believes in it. I have my own opinions on nationalism, which I don't really want to discuss right now, but I don't agree on his extreme version of what, to a degree, I believe in. But I find this work is your argument is his beliefs bleed into the work. Yeah, it does, but I think in that particular instance it doesn't. Also, he's kind of like flirting with genres now, which he's extensively gone on point in the past to. The artist we've talked about last night was Prince. I mean, he's completely different in the fact that he's similar in the fact that he's polarizing. He never wants to be one thing or another. And Morrissey's gone on to do the same. He's always said he just wants to be something different. He doesn't want to be the same. So if he's doing
he's just
something,
being an edgelord, though. He's just saying cunty things to be a cunt. And that's why it's really off-putting, because it's something that he can help.
You have to look at the situation. I think Prince said off-colour things to be obtuse as well, because he's hounded by the press. He's hounded by his position is he's a kind of wounded, tortured, sort of wistful, poetic, gay man who grew up in a very overly masculine area of Manchester during the 80s and was set upon by the press the entire time. I was always asked, why are you wearing blouse shirts? Why are you wafting flowers around? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Why are you?
I love the idea that he was wafting flowers around regularly, not just on stage. He was just walking around Manchester City Centre with some rhododendrons, just waving around like a madman.
Hold on, I had no idea. Is Morrissey gay?
Yeah, he's always said he's asexual, but
he doesn't want to be pinned down because he doesn't want to have that.
But it's very clear if you listen to his lyrics.
I find it funny weird really that you guys like I've listened to Morrissey as part of the Smiths and his solo stuff, and I've always paid a bit of attention to it. I've always found it very easy personally to distance him from his music. So
I do if there's somebody like Johnny Marr there, it's like almost like a what they call it, like stabilizers on a bike.
He's also
Johnny
said
Marr
some fantastically bad things as well. Before we get
Johnny
on the Johnny
Marr
Marr
has also said some horrendously awful things.
Before we get on the Johnny Marr train, which also gets rolled out for why people hate Morrissey.
The thing I noticed on this album is that my favourite track was What Kind of People Live in These Houses, which is probably the closest to a Smiths track on the album.
But just my point is, I think, yeah, he's said some particularly terrible things and it's a knee-jerk reactionary, but he's the same as many other Blueprint artists. He's reactionary and polarizing. So he's been on record to say such quotes as, dance music is made by boring people for boring people. Yet in this record, he's made a dance track. He's gone on points to say, to get into the charts at the moment, you need to be black, when there was a big resurgence of ska and reggae music, and yet there was only like one black artist in the charts when he said it on that episode of Top of the Pops.
Okay, but you raised Prince as a point earlier about doing reactionary things. Now, Prince would attack certain things. So Prince changed his mind on the internet. Prince was one of the first people to sell albums online, and then when he couldn't control it, he went off it completely and said that the internet is dead and hated it. That's a thing. He projected his hatred onto a certain way of doing things, a certain way of dealing with record contracts and labels. These weren't people he was attacking. Morrissey goes out there and says things about groups of people, and it's hateful. And that's the difference. That's why I can't separate.
If I did a bit of digging, I'm sure I could find a Prince book quote that attacked someone directly, because he's also been attacked for being an edgelord, and Bowie also, if you're going to go in that direction, has been accused of fascist views, and has even gone down the line of having photographs taken of him in Nazi uniforms saluting. Yeah.
Certainly, I wouldn't defend Bowie on that either, but no one is impervious to this kind of thing. People slip up all the time, but Morrissey's habitual slipping up is what you can't give him the benefit of the doubt anymore. And it really makes it hard to love him. It's like Bono. I really find that him hard to love. Quotes about the Holocaust are never going to fly. He's involved in that. He's had people fired for eating meat at venues that he's playing in, so he's vindictive with it. It's not rhetoric. He takes action, and he is as vindictive as he promises to be. So he makes no apologies about who he is, and fair enough. Some people can respect him for that. But in my eyes, you can't just say, "Oh, forgive me for being. I'm the kind of person who is a rude, horrible person. So please forgive me when I'm a rude, horrible person." That doesn't excuse the behavior. It just, in my eyes, makes you a worse person because you recognize this pattern of behavior. And I think Morrissey's like that. He doesn't he recognizes that he says stupid things, but rather than actually adjust his behavior and chill out.
And it's very unfortunate because most of his fan base are very liberal, easygoing people.
Yeah, and some people can see it through it, like yourself, and maybe that's my own personal failing.
No, I don't think it's a failing. I don't really want to get bogged down in an argument about humanity with you. I tend to see every single person, no matter how great or shit they are, as a complete spectrum, and I don't really judge anybody on one way or the other if I can. And I see even that guy as, he's done some shit, but he's also done some nice, and that's unfortunately the human condition.
But the real thing here is the album itself sounds fucking cool.
Yeah, like with Morrissey, I mean, I've tried a few times because I've got a lot of mates who like them, but I've never really been into the Smiths. I personally just don't like Morrissey's vocal delivery. It's very Marmite, I guess, and I'm leaning towards the I don't like it as much. But this album I did think was good. I don't really get, because unlike you guys, I don't really know any Morrissey stories of him being a dick, so I'm just going from what I hear on the album and that. And for me, the stuff he says is, it could be deemed controversial, I guess. Okay, for example, like the first track, where he's sick of people whinging. If we're going to kill themselves, just do it, right? And I'm myself, I think mental health awareness is very important and all that stuff. But I think he comes off as that person, like, I know like 20 guys at work like him. You know what I mean? They'll listen to this, go, yeah, this guy's on the money, And I'm not, if they spout off me, I don't get offended or think they're cretins. I'm just like, well, they've just got a different thought process on the matter. But like, for example, in my work, like I've had, there are people who have taken 3 years off paid leave for mental health.
Yeah, I know people in similar situations. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I think if you need help, you need help. But you've also got to recognise there are going to be people who think, well, they should just it's either get on with life or get on with being dead. I get that. I get where that mentality comes from, and I don't necessarily, think they're being bad for thinking of it that way, because these people do exist. Like I'd say 50% of people think that way. So, and I think Morrissey it depends which way you lean on a lot of the subjects, which really means if you like him or not, or even if you don't agree with it, is how much you're offended by it. Like, so by a lot of the stuff on the album, I wasn't offended by it at all.
Trust me, I'm not defending any of these opinions. None of these opinions I hold to be sacrosanct myself. All I'm saying is perhaps the reason why I've selected it is because I give people a wide berth.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of looking at things.
I did as well. With this album, I gave it a wide berth. And to be honest, a lot of the songs were catchy. I liked it more than I thought I was going to like it, just based on my previous, preferences with his other work. It was just quite good.
I gave it a 6, so I don't, by any stretch, think it was the worst album that I listened to. I don't think it was a bad album. It's just I can never love anything that Morrissey does anymore. I always have the same thing. I always like the music, and there's always some interesting tracks, but as an overall package, I find it sour. Speaking of classic artists who've had a modern resurgence, it's another one of Dave's picks to finish in 8th position. It is the legend that is Ozzy Osbourne with Ordinary Man, with a lot of cameos on it. Elton John's there. You've got Chad Smith on
Post Malone.
On drums. Post Malone, yeah.
Slash Tom Morello.
Tom Morello's heavily featured. And it's all produced by a guy called Andrew Watt. He's one of the producers on it. I think ultimately it does work.
It's an Ozzy Osbourne album. Like he's an artist I actually love, but obviously he's a subsidiary of Black Sabbath. I wouldn't say this is his greatest solo project.
No, I wouldn't.
No. Blizzard of Oz, surely.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously he had his solo projects originally with Randy Rhoads when he finished up with Black Sabbath and finished up with Tony Iommi and fallen out with the band basically, and Geezer and him sort of stayed in contact, but he didn't really carry on with those guys for much longer than that. But this is kind of like who's who of rock, which he's still in touch with. He's aware, I think, in this album of his mortality. He knows he hasn't really got a whole heap left. Sharon's probably milking him for all he's worth. And the relationship that he has there, I'm sure, is... it's cosmetic between both of them, but I'm sure they love each other, but they've had their fucking problems in the past. And I've said this previously. I said, I'm sure I get a little bit annoyed sometimes and think... Sharon's carting this guy around when he's fucking fucked and he doesn't sound particularly great on his records anymore. You should just leave him be. But then I think about some of the way he's treated fucking Sharon over the years and think, well, fuck the guy. Rinse him. Let Sharon sit on her arse and pursue her projects and get the old fucker to go out and do what he wants. He's sat on his arse, drinks, snorted, shagged his way around the fucking 80s and 90s, flogging like a horse in the 2000s.
It was osmosis, by the way.
Musicianly amazing because he can lean upon all of his peers, which is a lot. Which obviously everyone's tripping over themselves to work with Ozzy because he's a fucking legend. And Sabbath kind of invented fucking metal and are an incredibly good band. Some of the lyrics probably aren't the best in the world. The track with Elton John.
It's quite morose in places, I think.
Yeah, and the rhyming. I mean, Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi wrote a lot of the greatest Sabbath songs. Ozzy has written some of his own songs, and they have been good. He's kind of like a Shawn Ryder in that figure. Like, he's fairly poetic, but he also has off days, and when he does have an off day, it's particularly shit.
Track one, by the use of the word defecate in the song "Straight to Hell."
The liner notes somewhere here.
It's the lyrics. The lyrics for "Straight to Hell."
Death, we must celebrate. I'll make you scream. I'll make you defecate.
Yeah, not the most tasteful.
No. Also, it's a metal track, so I forgive it. It's not really a question of taste. It's more just a question of cheesiness.
Yeah, who cares what the lyrics are? Was the riff bitching? Yes or no? If
It's like when I did
fuck it.
English GCSE in year 7, I realised that meant poo, so I could upgrade my vocabulary but still say poo in a posh way and not get in trouble. It's like a kid sort of flicking his vocabulary with a crossbow into the teacher's face.
See, I didn't even listen to the lyrics. I paid no attention. I just enjoyed the music. It's just classic guitar music, man. And when I heard Slash, I was just like, my God, I feel like an 18-year-old again. And when I was first learning guitar, it just took me back to like when I used to love just straight up like rock music, when I was first getting into Guns N' Roses and that type of thing. And it was just a lovely little warm, nostalgic album for me because it's just straight up posing rock, isn't it? It's just, your guitar around your knees, you're on stage, you're fucking, giving it solos and that. And I loved it. I enjoyed it for what it was. I mean, like I say, it's not something I would listen to all the time, but I listened to it for this podcast and like, I enjoyed every song. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was just fun.
I think you can compare this album to Terminator 3.
Yes.
Hear me out where the bits that were bad and a bit cheesy, because in places, especially in his later life, Ozzy his music's almost becoming a parody of of himself almost. But when it's like in Terminator 3, it's a parody of Terminator 2 and 1. It's almost like a comedy. But the bits that are actually full of action, like, it doesn't matter how you got there or whatever, they're still good set pieces.
T3 still has that amazing crane chase.
Yeah, the set pieces are still there. I think
that's a great analogy. They've chucked the money in at the musicology, which is what he's famous for. And they know him as a character, but he isn't that character anymore. He's, a 70-whatever-year-old man.
Yeah, it's like when Stallone tries to pull out Rocky again. It's not quite the same.
I think I liked the songs on some which were more self-reflective because it became very apparent just from his lyrics that like this is probably, and he knows it, his last album. And you could definitely, there was a lot of songs in almost like reflecting on
especially the one with
career,
Elton John, the one with Elton John, which is the title track, I think.
Yeah, it's also the worst track on the album.
I really can't get over Elton John singing. Ozzy can still sing, but Elton can't. But Elton, I mean, you're going to say Elton doesn't have piano chops. I'd argue
no, he doesn't.
He
does not have piano chops.
Elton John's one of the greatest pianists of the 20th century.
Watch the Tim Minchin sketch. He is not. Elton John is nowhere near the upper echelons. Like, he's made a good living from what he writes, and it clearly has
classics as well.
Well, he doesn't write his own lyrics, does
he? No, but he writes the music, so he's all about the piano chops.
No, just like just because you can write a blues piano part, doesn't make you a great pianist. Like, he doesn't do.
No, selling like 20 billion albums would do that.
There's a skill in writing. Like, I saw Joe Satriani play live in Cardiff, right? And like, I don't just want to go and watch a guy wank off on a guitar for 3 hours.
Or any other instrument.
You prefer soundtracks to a dining experience.
Oh, burn! Yeah, you can't order pizza to that shit, can you?
Yeah, but that's compositionally interesting. And like Elton John's piano playing, his touch isn't even that great. Like, it's
Yeah, but it sounds good, and that's the only point to it. It sounds
To
good.
a non-piano
It's
player.
fun. Yeah, but to anyone else, it's just rock and roll, man.
Before we go back to Ozzy Osbourne, I'm just thinking, was it 65 Days of Static song where he just did the restaurant experience?
No, this will destroy you.
I just love the idea that, like, you're listening to this song and then all of a sudden, really quietly, it just goes, like, just, try the calzone. Basically said this album was...
We liked it. It was a good album.
Yeah, the riffs were great. It was the Terminator 3 of Ozzy albums, but still okay.
It was a good album. It was a good rock and roll album. It was just great guitars.
And usually one of the
lush.
best tracks, I think, was the Post Malone track.
I do agree with Dave that I think the Post Malone collaboration is probably my favourite on the album because it's the only one that isn't written in a blues scale.
In 7th place, with 34.5 points, was Algiers with There Is No Year, which is an interesting post-punk soul mix-up. It's very... I have it noted down as being sounding a little bit like if Echo and the Bunnymen replaced Ian McCulloch with Corey Glover from Living Colour. That kind of vocalist. Certainly a different sounding project. Tom?
I nominated this album, so I followed Algiers for a number of years because I discovered them because they're managed by the guitarist, the guy who was a guitarist in a band called Youth Movies. And I followed everything that he's been involved in. And their first albums were a bit inconsistent and experimental, and on this album it's actually come together and they've made something that's a little bit more cohesive. I think the conceit behind the album's a bit weird because it's the singer wrote a long poem and all of the lyrics in the album are derived from that poem. So at times they're a bit clunky, but then there's two moments that I absolutely love. I loved the track House of the Furnaces, was great, and I liked Unoccupied. And then there's the song Shaka, which I think is brilliant, but it almost sounds like Michael Jackson designed by H.P. Lovecraft. It's really interesting. I think the only criticism I've really got of the album is that sometimes it sounds like the singer is trying to shoehorn a melody, because I think they used to write everything by post. So that the guitarist would lay everything down and send it to the drummer who'd send it on. And occasionally it sounds like the vocalist is trying to shoehorn a memorable melody into something that's a bit too abstract for it. But other than that, I mean, it's virtually it's a great album. It's really, really cleverly done. And nobody else sounds like it.
I don't know. I don't know if it's no one else sounds like it. I mean, the problem is I can't name any bands that sound like them. But it doesn't sound like... But having said that, it's not really my genre. But it didn't sound to me like it was jumping out as like something that sounds unique or original. Like, it was pretty good. I didn't mind it. It's one of those albums where every song was like a 6 out of 10 for me. It was pretty good, nothing really to complain about. And then they bunged in the last track, wasn't it? They tried to make it faster and a bit more punky, and I was like, oh, this is just a shit punk song. So like, and I know it's got like a lot of lyrical content, which is important, but I don't listen to lyrics in music as much as I should have. So for me, it just felt like I had, except for the last song, just a lot of songs which sounded very similar in feel and tone. It's the same reason I didn't give a higher score to
Jessie Ware.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. I thought it was more to my preference than that, but it came under the same bracket of why I didn't score it higher. You see what I mean? It was okay. None of it was bad. Not one song was bad. I can't complain about it, but none of it moved me either. Like a good bowel movement.
I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was really well made. It was really well played. Mostly is what I enjoyed about it. Again, it was kind of like not something I would listen to a lot of. It kind of ticked all the boxes of the stuff I should like, but for some reason left me a bit cold, and I don't know why. Although I remember in my notes, I remember writing at one point it sounded like it would make a good soundtrack to Sons of Anarchy, and it's the vocals, and I think it's the vocals that put me off.
Yes, 100%.
No, it's like, what's his name? Fucking Jax is like riding with his arms like Jesus.
Crow
and he's-
flies west,
it's very, American. That's kind of what the vocals said, even though it isn't that.
Yeah, the singer, he's called Franklin James Fisher. He sounds for me like Ty Taylor from Vintage Trouble, which is a band I like. He's got that Americana vibe to his
If the
voice.
band had a different vocalist, I probably would have liked it more.
See, the vocalist for me was the high point.
The vocalist is what makes them them.
Yeah. I rated the band on the basis of this was of the rock albums that we had. This was the best rock vocalist for me because he's more catered to my tastes in soul, and it was more drenched in soul. I mean, there's a few more soul-orientated albums that we'll discuss momentarily.
I mean, I'm just sort of more happy that with our current setup, there's a lot of rock all the time, no matter what we're talking about.
That's the
And
nature
I'm
of
kind of
us.
glad on this top 10 that we've managed to sneak in some cheeky dance and soul elements going from. But
You've got to find it odd that one of the soul elements came from me.
yeah. But this, out of a lot of the rock decisions, this is the one I think I scored probably the highest.
No, I'm the same. I would thoroughly recommend Algiers. Going forwards, I'll be looking out for future releases and seeing what they're up to. So yeah, thank you, Tom, for hipping me to the funk, which is something I never thought I'd say.
No.
It was a good album. It was a good album. With our podcast, going back to what Dave said, I think one of the things is there's three of us on our podcast that are very much into our mostly guitar-based music. I know Tom's kind of a bit of an outlier. Me and Al are a bit more kind of straightforward in a sense. But I think the rock music is going to come up a lot just because of the taste of like mine, Al's and Tom's mainly. But then with me personally, I fucking love hip hop was my first love. It was my first obsession, and I fucking love dance music and electronic music, as you remember from my left field rant on the festival.
In sixth place was another Tom's Picks, scoring the same score, 34.5, but with a higher individual score from Tom himself. It is Alpha Male Tea Party with Infinity Stare, which is a math rock. It's something that I wasn't necessarily listening to, but I very much enjoyed.
Can I just get in there early so I can eat crisps? This is not for me.
It's important, so I will allow.
This band I followed. I first heard this band at Arctangent Festival in 2014, and they opened up the main stage on the Saturday, and there were about 10 people there, and they stood there in boiler suits, and they played, and it was like, see, the thing is, yes, they're math rock, but there's no one else in the math rock genre who sounds quite like them. They are heavy with a sense of humour. Like their track titles are usually funnier than this album. Like there's a track title on an early EP called "You Eat Hummus, Of Course You Listen to Genesis." They've got a sense of humour, but they write heavy as fuck banging riffs. And this album they're only a three-piece. It's guitar, bass, and drums, and they can do all of this live. I mean, they're very, very talented guys.
Yeah, it's no vocals until the last track, is it?
No, they don't normally have vocals. I mean, they normally put... The first album opened with vocals, and this album closes with them. But yeah, they're great riffs, great guitar sound, very, very good musicians. And it's fun. Like the tracks Locker Talk and Bonfire Disaster Movie they're really fun to listen to for particularly I like listening to math rock a lot. I listen to it a lot, that sort of genre a lot. Whereas this album is one that I would put on and play to other people and go, look, this is fun. This is math rock, but it's fun.
I quite liked it. I have a problem with just because it's a very, very technical album.
Yeah,
and because there's no vocals on it, there's no real hook for me. So the instruments and the riffs themselves have to be the hooks. I know I did like it, but for me it's almost like a look. It just seems like I think this band in general, for me personally, it's a band you admire for being just so good technically, but it's not something I personally want to.
This is exactly what I echo, Al. I think this is like the equivalent of
me three.
Of like me saying to everybody, okay, I want you to listen to this Turntable Wizards album. And you're also going, oh, it just sounds like a load of scratching from back to forward with samples. I'm like, yeah, but you don't really understand that this guy can like double juggle and he's like hamster flare scratching this one sample, unless you know the ins and outs of that.
See, I mean, these guys aren't even. If you want to listen to guys really wanking off on their instruments, listen to somebody like Animals as Leaders or something like that. I think, like this album, the thing I love about this band is it's not so much they're displaying virtuosity as they're almost like a band of riff magpies. They're like, oh, this is a really great riff idea, let's play this, and then they'll jump onto another thing and then jump onto another thing, and it's always really well produced. And I tell you what, dancing round in a festival to it is fucking great.
And of course now they can add riff magpies to their poster so more people will go and see it, because that's an amazing description.
I get what you mean, and I mean those. I thought it was like pretty good. I did enjoy listening to the album. My favourite track by far was track 9.
It's Bonfire Disaster Movie.
By far, which is probably the simplest song on the album, to be honest. Like, I think I have a real problem, because I like odd time signatures. Like, for years, one of my favourite bands was Dillinger Escape Plan, and to this day I still listen to them. And for me, that's, like, because when you refer to this band as heavy, I kind of disagree, because for a band to be heavy for me, it's got to be something that's, like, just like, oh, you know, like, bashing your head, like, yeah, you know, sort of thing like that. Like, for me, that's heavy. That brings out that head banging or something. But because of the time signatures in this, yeah, they've got distortion on, and yeah, the drummer's good and all this stuff, but it never hits into that point for me where it is heavy. It's I don't know, it's just something, because of the time signatures, it's not, maybe it's a genre thing for me, which it probably is. It's probably why I listen to thrash music. But it never really hits a groove where I feel like I'm going to hum a melody, which is why I like track 9, because it was just long periods of like just one melody, and it kind of reminded me of like Joe Satriani sort of instrumentality, where it's not necessarily about what they're playing, how they're playing it or whatever, it's just the main melody punctuating through all of it. And this album, I just don't think there was enough of that. I feel like they needed more returning to original melodies, which weren't like who the hell wants to listen to that? You're not gonna have that, you know. Like,
it sounds like procedurally generated content. Like they put a guitar into a computer and they say, right, this is a possible number of riffs. Where do we go? And it just takes them on a journey. It's dense and inaccessible.
Well, I'm going to speak about this album a minute because I think because I loved it. Tom told me to listen to this band loads of times, and I just never got round to it, and I wish I'd got round to it sooner. It's one of those later based bands that Tom gives me all the time, which I'm grateful for. But I listened to him and I was like, fuck me. And my notes were, this is the sort of thing that if me and Tom formed our own band, this is the sort of thing we would do. It was just spot on. It ticked all my boxes. It was just fucking excellent all the way through. Brilliant musicianship. It was just interesting to listen to. And it was the sort of stuff I'd like to play, you know. I'd like to have a project like that. And I think back to our 3-piece with your brother, Tom, and I'd like, you know, that's the sort of direction I would have liked to have gone in with that. It was, yeah, I'm kind of, but then I'm kind of like, you know, it's me and Tom are in our own little echo chamber here because that's the sort of shit we like.
It's a guitarist's album.
I'm just pointing out, not a guitarist, right?
You play guitar, though, and you play bass.
It's a musician's album.
It's a musician's album, yeah.
I listened to the whole album and I can hum track 9, but I can't hum one riff from any other song. For me personally, I just think they're a band that desperately need a singer. Like, desperately. Not because like it's necessarily boring, but they just need something that has to be the grounds the music a bit.
Get Morrissey in, he'll inject some personality.
Oh yeah, that'd be perfect.
He
Done.
probably thinks they're shit.
He definitely thinks they're shit. And he also thinks this podcast is shit.
Before we go on to the next one, I think I gave this a 6, maybe a 6.5. I did like it. I feel like these are the reasons why it wouldn't have been higher for me.
Yeah, you gave it a 6.
Yeah, it's like Tom would Run the Jewels. It's easier to describe what was missing than it is to say what was there, you know?
I gave it a 6 as well. I did like it. I think it wasn't memorable in the same way you couldn't hum it. I can't remember. But I have gone back and listened to tracks. So the God unit at the start. Yeah, there are some good tracks on it, and I think individually, for a nice little 5-minute chunk in between songs, I occasionally will find myself listening to that kind of stuff. The album itself, for me, doesn't engage me for long enough.
I think it's the world's best lift music. If you're going between levels, you'll be like, wow, this is the tits, and then you're off in 30 seconds. So,
I do recommend, though, if you do think, I quite want to hear what Alpha Male Tea Party sound like when they've got vocals. I know they've got one track on this album that does it. The opening track on their first album, Droids, is how I would want their vocals to sound. It's
okay,
really
I'll
good.
give that a go then.
Yeah, give that a go. Opening track on their first album, Droids, is really cool. It's probably my favourite track they've done still, even 3 albums in. But yeah, that's worth checking out.
It's a Cacophony Sessions classic artist. It's Pearl Jam with Gigaton, which scored 37 points. Martyn, this is one of your picks. It's one of the most progressive sounding Pearl Jam albums. I think it's very forward thinking, unusual sounds in there for a Pearl Jam album. The last time I listened to Pearl Jam was around 2009 with Backspacer. That's the most recent thing I'm familiar with. But there's synth pop on there. It sounds a bit like Talking Heads and a bit like Bowie on Dance of the Clairvoyants. So tell us a bit about this Pearl Jam album.
Well, you'll be glad to hear I'm not going to be too long on this because Pearl Jam is, they're my band. I've been obsessed with them since they came out. And Eddie Vedder, he's like my warm comfort blanket in life. But anyway, I love the album. But what I will say is, as someone who has probably heard every single thing that they've recorded and that is available, that it's definitely not my favourite Pearl Jam album. I think it's kind of in there in the middle somewhere. I mean, the first 3 are the best, but they've just been consistent. They've never released a bad album, but they've kind of oscillated a little bit.
Teetered off.
They've kind of oscillated between absolutely brilliant and kind of Pearl Jam by numbers. But the thing is with Pearl Jam, they're such an amazing band that Pearl Jam by numbers is usually better than most of what's around in what they do. You've got to remember they're a straight up rock band. They're not really aiming to be Radiohead or anything like that. The Dance of the Clairvoyance track was a surprise, and it was very Talking Headsy, and I liked it. But I when I first heard it, I thought, oh, that's a bit of a misstep, because it just sounded like 50-year-old guys, they've just discovered a synthesizer. When, for me, the organic sound of Pearl Jam is where I'm at. So yeah, Dance of the Clairvoyance is a great track, but I wouldn't really invite a lot of that for them. I think there are other bands that are probably more adept at doing that kind of thing. But also, there's quite a few tracks on there that are straight up rockers, and they're good, they're really good, but they don't really hit me or anything, and I enjoy them, but they're not like, if I made a best of Pearl Jam, they wouldn't be on it. But the side of Pearl Jam that I love on this album, and it's kind of like as I get older, the side of Pearl Jam I like the most is the more introspective, more organic, more kind of like pastoral, acoustic-y stuff where Eddie Vedder gets to really shine. His vocals are just right out and wise and just fucking friendly.
Yeah, the second half of the album really is more like
the last track especially, he's just like kind of like you're on a life journey. He's the guide that you want in your life, sort of thing. It's very much the Into the Wild soundtrack kind of thing going on. And they're not doing anything new, but it's just a solid album. And I think in 2020, when everybody in their own little personal universe was having whatever difficulties they were having, for me personally, it was just a beautiful little moment of serendipity where I was, oh wow, there's a new Pearl Jam album, man. This is, and it was just comfort. I'm hopefully seeing them in July. I've seen them before, and they put on the best show I've ever seen. They're just so all encompassing. They totally like embrace the audience, like a good band should, and they're very politically minded as well. But on this album, I expected a lot of real anti-Trump sort of vitriol and everything. There isn't.
Oh, there is.
It's there, but it's
there,
understated.
But you have to search for it.
Yeah.
It's understated, and that
which is nice, to be honest.
Goes to show the maturity of a band who spent their entire career actively fighting for causes and still do a lot of variety of different social causes and environmental causes and still do. They're very passionate about it. They're passionate about their fans. You know, they literally are like kind of the people's band. And I'm just so glad that they're still going and they're still releasing albums that are quality, even though I'd place it, you know, like I said, kind of at the middle, lower end of their catalogue. It's still a fantastic album, well deserved a place in the top 10 for me.
I really enjoyed this album. So as Martyn knows, like the deep American drawl of that grunge scene in the early 90s doesn't really appeal to me. Like, I had 10, it's a good album. For me, it's not a life-changing album like it was for a lot of people. It's like I say, I don't dislike it at all. It's a really, really good album. And then this album, I would actually say, is one of my favourite things Pearl Jam have done because it's really clever in a lot of places. Like, this is a group of very mature musicians. Eddie Vedder, his lyrics on this album are amongst some of my favorite he's written, like when he does lines like, so I was talking about wanting political albums to be like good, you know, and like line about the climate crisis, for this is no time for depression or self-indulgent hesitance, this fucked up situation calls for all hands on deck, you know. It's there's some really, really good lyrics on this album. I think his voice, that really deep American drawl has mellowed a bit and been replaced by an almost David Byrne-esque fragility, which I really like now.
Yeah, I think his vocals have got better.
I like how his voice has developed. I'd really like them to record 10 now with his voice as it sounds today.
I'm not sure it'd work, man, because the thing is with 10, it was very much a band who were angry. He was a young guy and he was like, you know, crowd surfing, and, you know, he was just full of that youthful surfer energy. And now he's like the Neil Young. He's the new Neil Young.
I like how his voice sounds now. Didn't love it in the 90s. Really like how it sounds now. And I like what they were doing with like Dance to the Clairvoyance. I listened to that and I was just like, wow, this isn't the Pearl Jam I remember. I dig this. Like I was into it. Like really, really enjoyed it. So I scored it very high, actually.
I was in a similar boat, to be honest. I think for Pearl Jam for me is because it wasn't like the thing when I was young. Like it hit Martyn, and a lot of people had a really good time in their life, and I can see why people love Pearl Jam. But coming a bit later, like for me, I've always thought of Pearl Jam to sound almost a bit like generic rock. You know what I mean? Which is probably unfair because when they were playing it, it wasn't. It was groundbreaking. But unfortunately, it's always been in that for me. But yeah, this album, it was quite refreshing, especially the albums we've been listening to. Even the rock albums we've listened to, like have been either quite soulful or quite challenging, like technically, or quite heavy as balls, like Mine stuff. But it was quite nice just to have a kickback, it's a bit why the Aussie album was great. Just a rock album. Like there's one thing I noticed when I listened to it was the drums sound a lot less overproduced than every other album on this list. Except maybe for my albums, you know, little self-promotion there. but like, if you could tell, like, it was some guy playing it, the fills were good and all that stuff. Like it didn't sound, like, they probably did, but because of the vibe it gave off, it sounded like it wasn't played to a metronome. If you see what I mean? Like, it just didn't, like, maybe it probably was, but, like, just the feel of it, it made it sound like it was a more organic live band. But this time where I thought the vocals were, like Tom said, I preferred them a bit more, and I like the odd synth bit to break up. Unlike you guys, I think it's because I just quite like the just rock your tits off songs, so I got let down really by it. I just, in general, and it's, you know, a bit of a sweeping statement, but I hate acoustic music. I just don't enjoy it. So any songs which are a bit too slow and they take it down too many notches, that's when I lose interest. And I think, despite what the lyrical content is, those were the songs that let it down for me. But other than that, like, I liked every song, like, except for like 2 or 3, which I thought weren't, you know, a bit, maybe, in my opinion, dull. But that's because I'm, you know, a Municipal Waste fan and just want to have pie for Ash all the time.
You're a Corpsegrinder. Of course you are.
But yeah, overall, I thought it was pretty good. I'm with Tom. I was I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Not because I always rag on Martyn, say Pearl Jam is shit. 'Cause I just like say Pearl Jam is shit to Martyn.
Edgelord.
Yeah, but in all honesty, I think Pearl Jam have been. They're one of those bands to me. I've always summed up as perfectly adequate. But so for this album, for me, it broke through that a bit more from classic rock I'm used to listening to. If you see what I mean. And yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Maybe this is a bit more long-winded than I expected it to be. Pretty good. 6 or 7 out of 10. I can't remember what I gave it.
I totally understand what you're saying, and that's kind of in the Pearl Jam catalogue. That's kind of how I felt as well, in a sense that it was just kind of, some of it felt like treading water. But what the things with Pearl Jam, they're a band of musicians who. Matt Cameron was in Soundgarden, and he's part of grunge royalty. He was in like the early sort of that early grunge scene before even Pearl Jam were around.
He was briefly in the Pumpkins in the mid-90s.
But this is a band.
When it comes to grunge drumming, I don't think there's any such thing as royalty, because every grunge band goes through like 20 drummers.
Yeah, well, but they're a band that have probably played more music than most people have listened to, and they tour all the time. They're constantly recording. The amount of experience that those guys have had is just phenomenal. I mean, to have a career like they've had, where they've spent a good 30 years or more of their life pretty much playing almost every day and recording and playing live, and just I'm absolutely blown away by. I mean, Pearl Jam are the last of the big, huge grunge bands that are left, and they saw through all of the heroin stuff and the suicide stuff and all the backlash against grunge and everything, and they're still around, and it's just they are a classic rock band. They always have been, and Ved has been like the main sort of like alternative kind of guy. He's massive punk background and everything, but they're just their experience, you can hear it. And you mentioned about the drumming sounding not to a metronome. It may not have been. It's possible that it wasn't. They're that good. They're that adept at what they do. They're so comfortable at what they do that no matter what they put out, it's never going to be bad. But they're older guys now, and a bit like Neil Young, he still releases music, which is still great. But it's not going to be groundbreaking.
With Pearl Jam, it's made me go back and listen to some of the stuff that's been put out more recently. I saw that in 2019, they re-released their 92 MTV Unplugged concert.
Oh, beautiful! Yeah,
available to stream and to buy now. And I went back and listened to that, and that's one of the best MTV Unplugged concerts.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, it's better than the Nirvana one. It's certainly better than Lauryn Hill's one. I think George Michael's is probably my favourite, but that's because it's George Michael. But there's no skipping over Pearl Jam's MTV Unplugged set, so that's worth a listen. And definitely going forwards, I think I'll continue to stay with what Pearl Jam do, because I think Gigaton is a good release.
I liked it. I'll listen to it again. It's pretty high praise.
That's a massive rating from Al.
Speaking of high praise from Alex, in fourth position, it's the Chats with High Risk Behaviour, which is straight up punk, straight into the top 5 as well. It's an uncomplicated record of a 3-piece, just making Australian punk music, and Al, it's fantastic.
Oh my god, I love the Chats, man! It's just shed rock, isn't it? It just sounds like it was recorded in a shed. I've talked about this before, but I think because I'm quite a simple guy. I don't really have much going. I don't really have anything that bothers me. Politically, I guess there's a few things I get annoyed at, but for the most part, the things that I like to hear about is just people having a laugh going to the pub. The prices of, vending machines or something. Just stuff that you see in your everyday life and that you can relate to. That's what I like listening to, lyrically, to be honest. I listen to music mainly to have fun rather than have a message being thrown at me. And I love this band because, one, I just love punk music. Two, it's Australian punk, which makes it way better. And three, it's just fun. It's not complicated. It's just every song is catchy. You could pick any one of these songs, listen to it, and then you'll be humming it 5-10 minutes later. If you listen to the whole album, it might be harder to distinguish them.
My favourite is the clap. I think that's the catchiest one for me.
That's a good one, yeah.
See, I wrote down what my favourite song on this album was... Oh, I like Do What I Want. That's the one I like.
I think musically, the most interesting song I've got here is being 4573. Musically, I think that's the most complex that it gets, but it's still very much in the same vein as hard-hitting punk about comedic subjects that delivers. It lyrically, it is funny. I want to go out and fill my gob. I haven't got a fucking job. I think that's from The Kids Need Guns. Dine and Dash is all about running away from a restaurant without paying. It's basically, it's just fun, everyday situations. I also noted that it wouldn't sound out of place on the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 compilation that was released in
definitely
2020.
not. I think my favourite song was Identity Theft. I think
That was my second favourite on the album, yeah.
I saw a film once, and it had Danny McBride in it. It's called Foot Fist Way. It's a comedy film, but it's like one of those kind of like alternative comedy films, and it's about like these kickboxing guys or something, I think. Anyway, there's a scene in it, right, where they go to this party and everybody's just off their nut and they're all getting pissed and they're all throwing beer over each other and stuff, and it's chaos in this fucking apartment, and there's this really dirty shed rock style garage rock band rock song going on in the background, and it just reminded me of that. It reminded me, it's beer party music. It's like bunch of dudes just in a room fucking getting fucked up on beer and having a right old laugh, you know, and I'm down with that, absolutely down with that sort of music. I love that grimy, dirty, garagey, badly played fucking punk. It's so good. I mean, I've been turned on to shed rock since you've kind of mentioned these guys and a few other bands you've mentioned before. Australians do punk so well. Proper like Australian rednecks just like getting wasted.
Oh,
it's
God,
so
yeah.
good. It's such a good genre because it's just pure escapism. It's just like, oh, I don't give a fuck, man.
Well, I think it says a lot that it ranks so high. It's because, like, even if it's not your cup of like tea, like music wise or anything, but like everyone is at the worst, you're gonna find it funny.
Yeah.
And you're just gonna find it amusing, and it's gonna make you smile. And you know, a lot of the music we've listened to for this, it might be better, it might be worse, but a lot of it, I don't think it's one album that'll make you smile more. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes music. I mean, for me personally, music is 90% of that. I very rarely want to listen to music for anything deeper, really. I just want to have a cool bitchin' riff and some dumb lyrics which I'll find myself like singing when I'm alone having a piss or something, you know, like that's what I want in music, and I think that this more than delivers in that. But I mean, my only criticism of this album really is that it might be a little too long. I think there's like 14 tracks on it or something.
I think it only comes to about 33 minutes or so. It's a pretty short, concise album. It's got me going back and listening to other punk artists, and it's got the essence that stuff like the Ramones have. In that it's just from the very first beat, you know if you want to get on board that train.
Pretty much.
And it doesn't stop. It doesn't change. It's just this is what the album's going to sound like. I think of all the recommendations that we have from this list, I think you'll know with this one, when you listen to the first track, if this is for you or not. And for most people, I think it's quite agreeable. I think you'll put it on and just go along with it, and it's fun, and you're on the vibe. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just a good, fun album.
There's a reason why they've surged in popularity, because their first song they released was a song called Smoko, and it went like viral. And I think that's what this band is. It's because all the music, unlike a lot of music we all listen to, like it's very shareable. Like, this is the sort of music you would quite happily find amusing and share on Facebook. Like, oh, check these guys out, what these bunch of wallies, you know, like, and you'd enjoy it because of it. And yeah, it's just really is just harmless fun. It's just a great album. I really liked it.
Yeah, me too. Enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, you can't really argue, really.
In third place, and so getting into the top three now, Dave, this is one of your picks, and it was a very popular one. It is the self-titled album by Working Men's Club, a band from Manchester. It's their first album. It's kind of electronica indie. It's very influenced by Manchester sounds and things like New Order. It's a dance record, essentially. with
It's very much a dance record, yeah.
northern diatribe over the top. It's abrasive. It's in your face. It's also got a track on it called John Cooper Clarke, as a Cacophony Sessions favourite, John Cooper Clarke, who I've seen live, it's pretty relentless. The last track is quite long, but it again doesn't overstay its welcome. Just like the chats for me, I think it's concise enough that it works. It's got a groove, and there's a lot of elements to it that I think are very promising for that band. Dave?
Yeah, no, they would be my number one pick of the year by fucking a long way. I think they're fucking great. They're supporting New Order in September, which I'm hoping to get to. They're also with Hot Chip. They're basically like an indie dance act. They're essentially genreless. I mean, they have influences from certain places, but yeah, it's like driving disco, dance, Manchester, indie, spoken word. But I think as things progress in music, like genres tend to get more and more blended anyway.
Yeah.
But the opening track, Valleys, is the track that I heard first. I thought it was fucking amazing. The track that you mentioned, John Cooper Clarke, is really good. It's almost like it could be lifted from Studio 54. But it's just, it's a really good dance indie record with a little bit of intelligence to it, basically. I think it could equally tear up a club as it could be listened to at home.
Yeah.
I think that's true, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's great. I imagine as soon as things get back to normality, they will be appearing on TV programs. They will be on Jules Holland. They'll be on Six Music. I mean, they already are in certain circles, but yeah, I think they'll be doing big things. This is their opening gambit, so just like I found with Shame like a couple of years ago, you know, when a band comes out with just a fucking uppercut of an album, you think, fucking okay, it makes you sit up and listen, and you really hope that they're going to carry on with that sort of vibe. But what they've delivered in here is just perfection. I think it's exactly what I want, which is kind of driving dance indie intelligence.
So what you're trying to say is, what this album is to you, what Drain is to me.
Yeah, exactly.
And whatever Earth Under Now
like,
is
this
to
album
me.
came out and was just like perfection for me to listen
It's just that exact thing you want to listen to.
I had a good time with this album. Like, I think the bass playing, particularly on this album, is really, really impressive. I think, so I did really enjoy it. There's the best chorus. I really like the chorus of White Rooms and People. And I loved the intro to Be My Guest. I think, when you say genreless, I think this band sound like, if you ask teenagers what Joy Division sounded like, this is what they would describe. We know if we listen to Unknown Pleasures, this sounds nothing like it, right? But if
it's better than that.
Yeah, it is. But if you ask kids today what Joy Division sounded like, this is what they would say.
Well, they're from Yorkshire, so they're not necessarily a Manchester band. But I think obviously they lean on that as a subculture. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure they've taken influence from that.
The track Cook a Coffee is really, really Joy Division-esque. The only problem I had with this album is that I really didn't enjoy the last track, Angel. It went on too long for me, and I know this is coming from somebody who listens to post-rock where tracks go on for like 25 minutes, and that sounds horrendous.
But I think the stumbling block
I am judging quietly
all
over
of these albums which came out this year is nobody's really making a concise album anymore. It's a conglomerate of, and Angel is their club offering.
And I understand what it exists for, don't get me wrong. But when I'm sat at home listening to it, I appreciate the reason it doesn't do a lot is so that it works on a dance floor. But because I'm sat at home listening to it and it's not doing a lot, I think if I was listening to this album when I was driving the car, if I was on a motorway and I was like, I'd probably end up driving far too fast listening to that track. But, you know, that would be okay. But with these records, I was trying to sit at home and just focus on the record. And when you're doing that, I think that one track is the only thing. I think that is the one track that knocked this album off a 9 for me.
That's high praise alone, so I'll take that.
It's actually the last track on this album is actually my favourite for all of the reasons that kind of Tom has said. In a sense that I love repetition. I love, as Tom knows, I love droney repetition, things that go on way too long and don't really deviate much. I'm all over it. I'm a shoegazer, you know what I mean? But like, it's got a real like motoric kind of krautrock vibe to it. It's forward moving, and yeah, like Dave said, it is the club banger of the album. But the whole album is just absolutely fantastic. I don't know if I would have said that it was kind of Joy Division-esque. I would have thought more New Order would have been a closer comparison for me, just because it's so upbeat. I mean, Joy Division were a dark fucking band, and they were a lot more scratchy and edgy, but New Order were kind of more polished, and this does sound like polished in a good way. And yeah, the northern influence of it just comes through so well. And it was just like when I was, listening to the radio back when I was like 16. It's the sort of thing that I can, if I went back in time and it was played on Mark Radcliffe late at night on Radio 1, it wouldn't sound out of place. It's so well made. It's so fucking good. It's really retro in a good way. I mean, I heard Valleys on Six Music. You listen to Six Music when I'm getting ready for work, and it stood out in the playlist. It was like I'd listen to Six Music and songs kind of go and come and go, and this one I was like, whoa, it made me take notice. I was like, this sounds like an old tune, man. This doesn't sound, but it does sound current, if you know what I mean, but it sounds like it could have been made in 1990.
I mean, for me it sounded like it was made in the 90s.
Yeah,
I like to think so. I did quite enjoy this album. I felt some of the tracks were a bit too long, but that's because I wasn't dancing to it. I was sat in front of a computer working whilst listening to it, so I don't want to hold that particularly against it. For me, the best way to sum up this album would be if Superhands and Jez were talented. Like, it just, you know what I mean?
That's
like,
outrageous.
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. It's kind of like that, but if they were talented and actually good. For me, that's what this album sounded like, which is a good thing, I guess.
I'm sure that's what they were shooting for.
It must have been.
That's quite a good analogy, man. But no, it's such a fantastic album. It's one I still listen to from time to time, when I'm out and about. For me, it is a good out and about album. When I'm walking to work or doing my walkabouts, it's good to have on and just like take in the scenes of the city around me and stuff, and have this in my ears. Like when I start, going to gigs in London and that, and I'm walking around London all day, I'm sure this will probably come up on my playlist.
We're hoping that we'll be able to take a little road trip with the podcast up to Manchester in September to see this band and New Order and Hot Chip.
Hot Chip, yeah. I mean, that would be an amazing.
Be good, yeah.
You can expect a live field recording of absolute nonsense.
That would be awesome.
Which is no different to what you're listening to right now. In second place, so we are in our final two for the evening, is an anonymous English group called Salt. And the album is called, it's an untitled album with the parenthetical title, Black Is. Politically driven, Black Lives motivated album, very neo-soul-esque. An amazing single called Wildfires. It's smooth. It's got involvement from some people we don't necessarily know, but links to people like Michael Kiwanuka. Sonically, it's somewhat different to a lot of the albums that we've discussed previously. It is more soulful, and it's very much on an alternative R&B, Childish Gambino vibe, with a bit more emphasis on real instruments, a lot of muted bass groups and things like that. So Martyn, this was one of your picks.
Yeah, this hit me like a ton of bricks, actually. I'm going to just glance over the message because I don't really want to dwell on the whole like political side of it.
Sure.
Because I think we get into one of those debates and I don't really want to.
Just to say, I think we stand with this one.
Yeah,
I stood with just for the record. I stood with the last one, just in case it didn't come across. I stood with the other record as well. I stand with this one. I just disapproved of the last message, and I think this one. I disapproved of the way the message was phrased in the last one because I don't think it was done accurately. This one, totally on board with this album. This was my one pick of someone else's. This is the only pick of anyone else's that made my top 10 of the year.
Right. On that note, with the message and everything, I think what I like about it is it's quite understated. Now, I remember reading recently in the past couple of days a rapper, I don't know who it was. Oh, that was it, Madlib, said something along the lines of, there's no Public Enemy around at the moment and we really need a Public Enemy. And I'm like thinking, well, yeah, that's true. I think RTJ4 comes close for me personally. But like, I think it's when, the whole Black Lives Matter thing blew up and it was, the thing you first think is, yes, the black music movement's going to get angry and it's going to be very, explosive. And, you want your Public Enemies to come out and rage against it. But what I like about the Salt album is it's not like that. It's not angry. It's actually just sad.
Educational and rise above.
Yeah, and it's just like it, rather than the black fist of rage and defiance. It's more like just a head in your hands, just sad about it. Just like, why is this still going on? It's just very like melancholy and it's very like warm and like just kind of let's try and find some optimism. It's a bit like
it celebrates blackness in a very open
it does.
way. It doesn't alienate them.
No, and it does. Absolutely, and it doesn't go like look at our oppressors. The spotlight isn't on the oppressors; it's actually on the people who are being oppressed, which is unusual. And it's a bit like what Curtis Mayfield did. He did the same thing, whereas it wasn't like talking so much about look at what's happening to us, those bastards in power. It was more about we got to come together and we've got to be as one sort of thing. And that's what Salt were going for. And they're doing it in such a human and in a lot of ways comforting. The use of children's choirs in it is really nice. There's a nice touch. But for me, also, that the whole message, we all know it's there. And I just like the way that the whole, situation last year was approached by them. But musically, which is kind of what I want to focus on more, is like the production is so sparse. There's so much space. There's so much simplicity to it. It's
fantastic.
Yeah, there's no virtuoso musicians in there jamming off loads of times and everything. It's very simple.
You can tell it's a conglomerate. I wouldn't be surprised if people like Gregory Porter and other kind of prolific black jazz musicians were involved because it's that kind of complex and verbose. But yeah, I mean, it's a great album. They did 5 and 7. They kind of do 2 album drops at once the year before.
They did Rise as well with this one, didn't they?
Well. Yeah. So Rise and Back is, and we got 5 and 7 previous years. But yeah, all of them are fucking amazing.
Ultimately for this one, I mean, the thing that really got me is the single Wildfires. For me personally, it's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard, and that's high praise, because it is so basic that literally, the main focus, which is the vocals, are just stunning, absolutely stunning.
I've been spinning that quite a lot.
There's about 3 instruments on it. There's the drums, the bass, and some synth pad, and that's about it.
It's all about the space.
All about the space, and it's just one of the most beautifully spacious songs. It's probably up there in my top 10 songs of all time.
Gorgeous hook as well. The when it all comes together.
Yeah. It breaks my heart, that song. But anyway, Salt. That's the one.
I really enjoyed it. Although Wildfires wasn't my favourite song on this album, I actually preferred Hard Life. I think. Love this album completely. There's some weird production choices. Now, I don't listen to a lot of soul and funk, but I find it really odd. The snare is really tight and pushed really far to the front of the mix, and the bass is pushed really far forwards in the mix. And the drumming is really odd because it almost sounds like it's done by a small child sometimes. I know the thing about this album is...
Yeah, I get it.
The thing about this album is everything is so deliberate. like, because there's so little going on, it wasn't like, it was done for a deliberate reason and for an effect.
It could have been done by a small child, for all we know. The whole band could be small children.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
It could be.
I can also explain to you why drums need to be that way in hip hop and soul, if you'd like.
Yeah, explain it, because this record it's far more obvious than others. So go for it.
So, like, whenever you've got a rhythm or a pocket, especially in hip hop, you're always looking for like quite a tight break, as it's called. So, like, it's in between a fill and a rhythm. The point of it is to try. If you ever see like soul drummers or live hip hop drummers live, you'll see that they put like a wet t-shirt over the top of the snare.
Is that just to get the snare drum tighter, so when it cuts, like when you stop, it's abrupt? You know what I mean? Like, no resonance. Is that the term?
Over-compression was like a production technique in hip-hop and soul for a deliberate reason. They wanted to be as crunchy and as poppy and like as abrasive as possible. And rim shots are like over-compressed to hell, and you'll have snare drums like pulled to the absolute tightness possible. And fills are kind of like mixed in between both of them. But it's always been the way to try and have that break and just sound different and come out from the crowd.
Yeah. It's the other thing I really enjoyed about this album was the structure of it. The structure of it feels like a lot of hip hop albums in that it's lots and lots of little sections, but with a lot more musicality than that. So it's like it's just really well put together.
Well, I have a slight theory on that. Is like, I think hip hop learned from soul musicians in the past, and everyone who's a soul musician or a funk musician now probably had some sort of basis in hip hop before they knew about everybody prior in the 60s and the 70s. So they kind of learned that hip-hop production before they even learned the history of funk and soul.
Sampling certain aspects.
Yeah, like foregoes the original recording.
Yeah.
And like over-mastering, over-compression probably pushes the drum sound in that direction.
I mean, everything you guys said is true. Everything. I mean, I think I've said to you guys before about it, but like, I wasn't. I like the songs that were good were really good, but. And I know I can't refer to it as waffle because it's not waffle because of the subject matter, but not including the subject matter for me, it wasn't quite as good as you guys may think it is. I think its importance as a movement for me is better than the music behind it. And maybe the music behind it isn't my cup of tea, so it didn't grab me in a certain way. I mean, it was good. I don't want to say it was bad because it was good, but as the person who gave it the lowest, I thought I should explain why. I guess I felt some of this. It felt like a lot of intros, and you know.
There's a lot of segues on the album. I'll give you that.
A lot of segues. Yeah, I'm not a big segue guy. It starts off with a
segue as well.
Ruins my shuffle. That's enough to get it at least a 7. No higher. Ruins my shuffle at work.
I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. I still think it's a very good album. I didn't fall in love with it enough to go and listen to that other stuff. But I wouldn't be averse to giving their other stuff a go. I think they're great. I think the message is important. The album is clearly well made and has an absolute banger on it, an undeniable banger. Some may say an undeniable banger in Wildfires. I think that's a really
Listen
great
to 5 and 7, you heathens.
I might give them a go, but there's a lot on my later base at the moment, so we'll have to.
Like what mine said at the start is probably the best thing to say about it is it's basically highlighting an issue, but without pointing blame at people, rather than looking within yourself on why we're good and why we're powerful. Yeah. And I think that's a good. I mean, there's a lot of bands who wouldn't go that route, and it kind of turns a lot of people off, myself included, where, you know, at some point, even if you agree with it, if someone's telling you a message like that, you can't relate to it if it doesn't directly affect you, if you see what I mean. Like, so, and it gets around that by not doing that, you see, like, which is why I liked it.
So, what is our favourite album of the year? first place with a total of 39.5 points, which was a whole point ahead of Salt.
Dave is holding up the vinyl on the video.
Dave has purchased it on vinyl. It is A Hero's Death by Fontaines DC, an Irish
Good album.
post-punk band, essentially. It's very organic sounding. It sounds very authentic, and I think that's why we love it so much. My particular favourite songs on it are Televised Mind and Living in America. I think they're some really interesting songs. They've got some American influences in there. I can hear potentially, as well as the post-punk influences, they've got folk influences in there as well, and I can hear some early U2 in their sound. Martyn, you picked this one. Take it away.
Right, well, last year, or was it the year before, Shame came out with their debut album, and there's the Six Music Darlings. You know, they have all these post-punk bands doing the rounds. Six Music are really into the post-punk at the moment. You know, they kind of champion bands like Savages and people like that. And Shame stood out. And I heard a few Fontaines DC tracks from their first album, and I was like, oh, they're all right, but it didn't really hit me. And then this album came out, and they're now my new favourite band, my current favourite band. They're just, like you said, I think the word authentic is a good word to use, because they really are. They're just, obviously sound-wise, it's right up my street. Post-punk, you know, that kind of angular guitar, and, you know, just that kind of real, like, you know, sort of 80s, you know, after Joy Division sort of sound, you know. Just love it to bits, absolutely adore it. It's the sort of guitar playing I like to play as well, a lot. I've been writing a lot of post-punk, but there's something about this album, I cannot put my finger on what it is, but it's just, I don't know, man, it's like, I mean, they're Irish for a start, and the vocalist, he doesn't hide his Irish accent, which is
very thick, yeah.
It adds to it.
Yeah, it makes it better.
It's just a band, you know, they're just a bunch of young lads in Ireland. You can tell they probably grew up on some council estate somewhere, but not in a way like, you know, like Arctic Monkeys came out and they were really fucking good, but there was a bit of a smugness to them. Whereas Fontaines DC, there's a kind of like almost, fucking hell, we're successful. How the hell did that happen about them? You know, like a kind of...
There's no brashness, is there?
No, they're not showing off. They're just... they're just playing. And I remember somebody once describing them as like... imagine like an Irish folk band in like a little pub somewhere drinking Guinness, and they got stuck in a time machine and sent to the future and given electric guitars and said, play some music. That's what they sound like. They sound like kind of, you know, an Irish folk band who are doing post-punk in a good way. I also heard someone else describe them as the Irish Interpol, which really fits, especially on the track.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's
the track you said is my favourite on it. It's just that riff is just so mournful and like just so fucking like, I don't know, man. It's really hard for me to describe it, but it just really hit me in all the right places. It ticked
Which
every
song is
box.
this? Televised Mind?
You said. It's like one of the slower ones, yeah.
Oh, see, we got confused. For the record, Televised Mind was my favourite.
Televised Mind is great, and live they're brilliant as well.
My favourite was A Lucid Dream.
You know, I really want to see them. They're probably the band that I most want to see at the moment, and Interpol as well if they end up touring again. You know, I'm obsessed with Interpol, but like, yeah, they're just amazing. You know, they're not the best musicians in the world, and the singer, he's got that certain style to him. He's not really a vocalist in the kind of sense that you think of singing. A lot of his singing is very kind of like non-technical.
It almost sounds like Underworld in places.
Yeah.
It sounds, with his accent, it sounds like he's speaking rhythmically.
Yes.
That's exactly. It's very Ian Jury.
Yeah, or Fred Schneider from the B-52s.
It's almost beat poetry, man. Like, it's almost like beat poetry set to post-punk. But yeah, I love his accent, man. I like the Irish accent anyway. Who doesn't? But like, it just stood out the way the broad Irish accent came out. It's an amazing album. It's an album that I've probably listened to since I first heard it. I've probably listened to it more than anything I've listened to since. I listen to it probably every day at the moment. I'm sure, I'll get tired of it, but hopefully they'll have something out again this year. But it totally eclipsed Shame for me as the raft of, new sort of indie guitar gods. So, yeah, Fontaine's, man. I think it's deserved of its number one spot, even though I'm biased.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% agreed and I'm 100% backed that it's number one of that. I don't think it's eclipsed Shame, and unfortunately, fortunately for me, Shame have released an album this month, and it's fucking brilliant. And all of the things that we've said previously about the band is that they were possibly a little bit immature, their subject matter and the musicianship wasn't so great, has all been addressed in that album, and I think they're going in a fucking really good direction. And I hope the Fontaines do the same thing. I mean, if they do the same, then you're just going to have two bands which are really on a fucking good parallel with that. Genre.
Imagine that double header of a bill, man. That would be something else.
I fucking love it.
I enjoyed the album. I have no objection to it winning our album of the year.
Me neither.
I don't think it's not perfect, but then I don't think none of us were ever going to agree on an album that was going to top the list. I think, and it's so if Salt had topped it, I think I'd have been really happy. Al probably not so much. And I think, for example, so what I wrote in my notes this album, I think the thing is, I really like all of these songs in isolation. I think it's post-punk. I like listening to a track here and there. With the flow of the album, it meanders a bit until track 4, and then a lucid dream kicks in, and I'm like, yeah, I really liked track 4 on this album. I also think that You Said, which I really like, but it does sound, the guitar part sounds a lot like the Blue Tones. It really does. Listen back to old Blue Tones records and then listen to You Said, and it does really sound similar.
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean. Yeah.
It isn't a bad thing. It's just a funny observation.
It's that compound bend thing, isn't it, that he does?
Yeah. But it's like a post-rock band trying to sound cool who end up sounding like the Blue Tones. You've got to see some fun in that.
Absolutely.
Occasionally, because the singer isn't much of a singer, Oh Such a Spring, I think, was ambitious for a vocalist of his ability to try and pull off. And I think that's the rest of the album, as a vocalist, he actually plays to his strengths pretty well. And I think that one track he didn't so much. Those are my only being slightly overtly critical.
To wrap up, I really think it's an exciting album, and the prospect of having some new bands on the horizon is something that I'm looking forward to for 2021. Thanks very much for listening to the first episode of the second season of the Cacophony Sessions. So we're going to continue to produce content throughout the year. Coming up next would be our top 20 songs of 1991, which is a very popular year if you've listened to our previous episodes. So we're going there. We're going to have a similar structure to this and go through a ranking of individual songs from 1991. So that'll be good fun. So we hope you've enjoyed our album of the year, all our thoughts on it. We've given you lots of recommendations. Top of the pile is Fontaine's DC, so go and check them out, but feel free to go back and listen to the other ones. So Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome to 2021. Let's get through this shit show with some more music.
And listen to Drain and Gulch. Right, bye, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Take care of yourselves. Follow me on Twitter at Golden Pump, like us on Facebook, follow our blog, and do remember, most of all, stay funky.